Hello, Kansas City. Thanks for joining us again for another fantastic episode of what we're calling Life After. Life After is a chance to explore the many paths that may emerge after high school and explore some of the people and stories that we may not have heard from in quite so many years. What's really fun about today's episode is that we have expanded a little bit. You might notice I don't think Jason is one of my students and I'm not one of his. However, because of the concept of the show changing a smidge to being able to talk to people who have a story after high school, also asking people for referrals after an interview. I was referred to Jason by another interviewer, Christian Heaton, and he and I grew up and went to the same school. And it turns out I don't necessarily know everyone, but I do know that I think Jason went to that same school. And so he's here to share his story a little bit today. Welcome, Jason Potts.
Hey, everybody. And thank you, Chris, for having me on. I appreciate it.
So where we go to start these interviews is really just that number that's like what year you graduated and also that place. And then really just kind of reflect on what you remember either about that year or that place that's still with you today.
Yeah, so I was class of 1995 and I graduated from Lincoln Prep. And I know we both went to Lincoln Prep. I think you were class of 96, is that correct?
I was, yes.
Awesome. And and so what I have my own dog. He's in doggy daycare right now. So
yeah, we're gonna trust that was the last we'll hear from him. Let's see.
So what I remember from my senior year of high school, I remember feeling like there was so much promise in my life at that time. So I attended Lincoln Prep. I had applied to really almost all of the top colleges, and I got into all of them. So I got into Harvard, I got into Yale, I got into Princeton, Stanford, Northwestern, Yale, and Bates College in Maine. And those were the schools I applied to. And I ended up going to Yale undergrad. And I just remember thinking that, okay, like a lot of my years growing up in Kansas City, there was a lot of struggle in my life. And I thought, okay, once I graduate from high school and go to Yale, I'm going to be set. Like it's going to be an uphill climb from this point on. And what I've learned over the many years and decades, is that I've had some setbacks and I've had some successes, and life can get very messy. I am so grateful that I went to Lincoln because at that time, and I think this is still the case, it was very diverse. And so when I went to Yale my first year, I quickly realized that most of my peers did not have that experience. They were very sheltered and had very sort of closed-minded ideas about what other people's lives were like. And so I'm grateful that I had that exposure growing up in Kansas City and going to Lincoln Prep. So long-winded way of saying I was class of 95 at Lincoln.
No, it's really cool and a really neat perspective to kind of remind me of also, because I was what 1 year after you and knew people 1 year before, and that just kind of riding the bus with various age groups throughout your transition. And I was definitely a bus rider for most of my schooling, and then you just you're introduced to a lot of different people throughout your years. And then I also went off to a school where not a lot of people had had that experience, and then come to find out, there's movies like Dear White People and things like that that reminded me of being on this one particular campus. And just not exactly felt like progress to me of going from such a like you said, open-minded and kind of very expressive from a lot of different vantage points and perspectives, and then to hearing from mostly still kind of one main perspective,
Yep.
and calling that the next level of education. That was shocking, and I think those schools have had to rethink that a little bit now, which is fantastic. But I remember when they were just starting to have to rethink some of this messaging and who was telling it, and the lack of representation on campuses. And so, all right, well, yeah, that's a fantastic way to start this. Tell me, given all of those things and variables, what do you remember about making your move right after you did walk the stage at Lincoln and had this experience? Because what I like to center on these is I remember that move, and I remember kind of hoping and trusting and using other people's inputs a lot, but and basing it on some of what I wanted, but it's a lot of pressure to make that move. So what do you remember about that move that you made?
So, making the transition from Kansas City, where I'd lived my entire life, to college and moving so far away, um, I was really excited about the opportunity. So I wish, if looking back, I wish I had um, taken advantage of all of the resources that Lincoln at that time offered. So, talking to, guidance counselors, and I did talk to a handful of teachers, and really trying to stay connected to, um, you know, friends of mine who I graduated with. A lot of us have reconnected, um, now that we're older, but I don't think I did as good of a job as I could have in terms of um, sort of tapping into those resources before making the move out east. So if I had to do that over again, I would have just stayed connected to them, because I really did think that once I graduated, it was going to be like, okay, in a way I'm kind of starting over, and that's and I think that was a mistake.
Okay. Interesting. So remembering that and kind of making your move, you said it hasn't been easy. Well, so like I guess at this point you're in a situation that's a product of the work you did when it wasn't easy. And what's some of that work you did, I guess, and then kind of bring us up to where you are now, because I think I'm not as sure myself, but I know when Christian suggested you, he mentioned a couple of things you're doing. And so can you bring that kind of to what work you did to get where you are now and kind of where you are now?
Yeah. So right now I am living in Chicago. I've moved to various cities over the course of my professional career. I literally just moved here about 4 weeks ago, so for a new job. So currently, I'm director of programming for a small news network called Newsy. Actually, in Kansas City, you can watch Newsy on channel 50.5 if you have a digital antenna. And we're also on all of the connected TV devices. But so I'm in charge of programming. But my current role, I was a television news producer at ABC News in New York, and had a couple of other sort of TV news related roles. Doing frankly a lot of what you're doing right now, like asking people questions and sort of putting together stories for people to watch. And it's been an eventful career. It's been again full of like ups and downs for sure. Um, I think, again, having that experience at Lincoln has really, and growing up in Kansas City and growing up in the midst of sort of the, desegregation efforts back then, um, have stayed with me today. The understanding that there's a wide variety of different types of people, which again, I took it for granted that people had that exposure, and a lot of people really don't. And it's disappointing. Um, so that's what I'm doing now. And again, I've been on the job for probably about a month, so it's all very new and exciting.
Wow. So New York, big time as far as like the speed and the pace, I would imagine, of even the news to keep up with that tempo is. So is what, am I right to assume that that's kind of what that frenetic, never stopping kind of pace feels like?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. It is. It is.
Uh,
I mean, and I've tried over the years to, and I think this is important to have a bit of balance. But for especially after I graduated from college and maybe the first 10 years, in my career, I really focused a lot on work, to the detriment of my personal life. But yeah, it's important to have balance when you're in that environment, because you're right, news is constantly changing being in that industry, and then New York is just, it's out of control. And so yeah, it's again very different from Kansas City, but I'm glad I had that grounding, because a lot of people didn't have that.
yeah, you've like the tri-state thing going on here with KC, Chicago, and New York, and like really cool, really awesome vantage point. All right, so these are fantastic ways students to out there to explore that there are ever changing possibilities, and one thing we keep hearing from people really does lead to another. And pursuing your goals, I think, does start pretty early, and it's fun to hear Jason here kind of outline a similar thing I think I felt about the school I started from and how it really does point your perspective. So wherever you are out there listening, and you're starting to get older and take school and life a little bit more to heart or to mind, either or both. I think maybe these interviews help serve, some chances to think about where you're going to go and what you're going to do. So that's the final question, sir. And it really, I remember hearing things from teachers and having the need to kind of rely on some of their perspective that was ahead of mine, or a couple years, could really save you some chances out there. So, do you remember such advice, or do you think there's something you remember not hearing? Either way, that you think young people really would need to hear today in this very complicated world that they are going out into. Let's kind of finish up with something you might think there. What did you hear, or what do you think you needed to hear?
Yeah, I want to first give a shout out to a lot of my teachers in the school district that I still think about and wonder where they are. Mrs. Watlington and Mrs. Trantham when I was in at Southeast Middle, and at Lincoln. I still keep in contact with Miss James Boseman, who was my speech, debate, and drama teacher, um, and many others who I think about on a fairly frequent basis and wonder what they're doing and how they are. Um, but I think this wasn't overtly stated to me, but I think Miss James Vosman, when I was doing sort of original oratory for the speech and debate team at Lincoln, um, sort of left me with this understanding that it's important to make your voice heard, no matter how no matter how difficult, but especially if it's difficult, and especially if you're in a situation where you're surrounded by people who don't look like you. And I've been in that situation a lot, where I've been in rooms where I'm the only Black person, or I'm the only gay person, or, you know, I have a different perspective because I grew up in Kansas City and everyone else has grown up in like, upper middle class suburbs in on the East Coast or West Coast. And so speaking up and speaking your truth, I think is so important. It's important for your own personal mental health, but it's also you're making an impact. And so um, I think I came away my experiences with Mrs. James Vosman and doing that work on with speech and debate really sort of emphasized for me the importance of standing up and speaking up for others is really important. So that's it for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I credit a lot of those same people and have talked to people about that similar kind of interest and curiosity. Elaine Schlossman was the person that, for me, really just made literature class like boundless and really took notice of my writing and had a way to make people feel really nervous but then so excited. It was like winning a prize, when she mentioned your work. So same deal as I, in kind of reaching out to her, decided to be a teacher because I would show her my work and stuff I was playing around with, short stories and things. And I think it was her that taught me that you could get paid to continue to do this as a teacher, and then you would get a chance to learn and then be so involved in the craft. And then, so I mean, yeah, those kind of things, right? And that I always realized I think I wanted to get paid to learn, whatever that was going to be. So if you're listening, education is actually one of the jobs where you do get paid to learn, and not just to learn all the things you have to, but even some of the things you choose. So if you're looking for a cool path where you grow all the time in unfounded ways, try education, listening folks out there, because everybody who comes on here sure makes it sound like special work to me. So it's been wonderful catching up with you, sir. I thank you for your story and your gems of wisdom, your energy. So keep in touch. This is fun work to start and to do and to send out into the world. Speaking of which, world, if you're listening and you want to do this show and come on and talk to me about your path, you maybe went to our schools in Kansas City Public or maybe some other path. Really just get a hold of me and we'll talk about an angle that might really make sense for someone else to hear about your story. So it's been fantastic. Here we are again on Life After. Thanks for tuning in, Kansas City. And thanks again, Jason Potts, for being our fantastic guest today.